joining us now from the Orange County Register building in Santa Ana with more about the details of Sheriff Mike Corona's resignation. We welcome political reporter Peggy Lowe. Peggy, you've been on Corona Watch all day, haven't you?
I sure have. I've actually been on Corona Watch for about 2 years.
So now the culmination, I guess, of all of that is his resignation today. We saw Mike Corona in the package that we did with Lance Orozco. What feelings did you get from his resignation today?
Well, it's sort of what he said when he posted his announcement very early this morning on his blog. He said he does this with a heavy heart. Clearly, in Lance's interview, he shows that he didn't want to leave this job, that he won't be able to come back to this job, and that made him sad. But what he said all day was that he needs to accept the pro bono services of these two really top-notch criminal defense guys, and he just can't do that because of the state law that bans gifts to public officials.
And we want to reiterate, Bill Campbell said it, Schroeder said it, that there was no deal, no plea deal that came along with today's resignation.
No, and in fact, he said there will be no plea deal. He said he is absolutely going to trial. That's in June. He said he will be vindicated. And when our reporter, Larry Wellborn, asked him how so, he said, because I know the truth.
You know, Peggy, you had, again, the story this morning broke, you got the information, I guess, yesterday. But when you look at it now, are you surprised at the timing?
I was very surprised at the timing. I actually got wind of this last week, and up until this point, Corona was making it really clear that he was not going to step down. On November 5th, he came out of the federal courthouse, you guys showed the tape there today, and said, I am not going to resign because I am not guilty. He was clearly going to stay in office. Last week, we talked about how he came back to work. So I was very surprised that he finally relented and did this, but he said even, and Schroeder said today too, he felt he had no choice. He was backed into a corner by this state law.
Jack Anderson will now serve as the interim sheriff until the supervisors appoint a new sheriff. Is it a surprise that Joanna Galinski did not take the job?
I was kind of surprised about that. Joanne is very ambitious, and she's very smart, and she's worked very hard to get to the top of that department. But from what I understand, Corona really thought about, okay, who is going to be the guy I can put in charge that might be palatable to the soups, who could, lead the department. Joanne does have some family obligations, so that could actually be the reason why she chose not to take it. So now Jack Anderson will be the guy who moves forward now. But the interesting part is this. Supervisor John Morlock had a press conference this afternoon and said he doesn't know that Corona can actually appoint Anderson as his assistant sheriff because by state law you have to appoint the under sheriff. That was Galinski. And so Supervisor Morlock said, we now have 4 assistant sheriffs. Who's really going to be in charge? So they have county council looking at that.
Well, what will take place now in trying to make something permanent?
Tomorrow morning, Morlock and the board will take up, when the meeting begins at 9:30, whether or not Corona could actually appoint Anderson because he was just the rank of assistant sheriff, not under sheriff. Then Morlock said they're going to start the process of a search for a candidate who's going to fill this gig through 2011. That's how long Corona's term lasts. So Morlock said that could take any amount of time. They may do a national search, they may look within the department, they may look at local candidates, and this could take a long time.
And we just heard from Bill Hunt earlier today. We've heard from Bill Hunt a number of times. We've had him on and gone out and done stories about him. His story is fairly well known in the county in his leaving of the sheriff's department. What are his chances? I don't mean to ask you to look into a crystal ball, but at this point, Bill Hunt for sheriff, is that something that we can actually think about?
Oh, he certainly has a chance at this point. I would say this, he's very popular with the union members. I talked to the union boss today, and he said, if there was a membership vote today, Bill Hunt might win that. Now, another guy that they're looking at is Paul Walters, the Santa Ana police chief, as well as Ralph Martin, who is the Los Angeles sheriff's commander. So I think anyone has a chance at this point. Morlock really opened it up today. He said, hey, anybody with a nice resume and who's been a peace officer, apply to me.
And District Attorney Tony Rackauckus, what was his response to today's announcement?
He issued a very short press release, and he said he thinks that Corona's resignation was good news for the county, good news for the residents. He said he looks forward to working with Jack Anderson. It was just a very short press release.
Okay, and in our last little bit, you heard Mike Corona say in our story that he thought that this whole thing was part of an agenda by people who don't like him. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's clearly aimed at former Assistant Sheriff George Jaramillo and Don Heidel, former friends of Corona who he placed in charge, and now they have turned on him. He has always said that he believes George Jaramillo is jealous of him, and that's why he's gotten back on Corona. But George Jaramillo would say the same thing about Corona, and he has said it in the past.
All right, Peggy, thanks so much for joining us. We're glad to have you on ocregister.com/buzz. You can get all of the blog news on all the happenings that Peggy covers. Thanks so much, Peg.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.